Felix, welcome here in our brand new podcast studio. How proud are you to be here?
I'm really proud to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And really cool that you set up this project.
Yeah, I'm just saying that because you met us, I think, a year ago. And looking back now, a lot of things have happened.
Yes.
So I'm also very excited to have you here today and to talk about everything.
1 year sounds so
1 year. It's a bit
short.
over a year, actually.
Sounds so short to how it feels. It's crazy.
It does, actually, yeah. So, yeah, a big warm welcome to you, Felix, here in our studio. And thank you for being here. And I'm very excited that all of our listeners get to know you today because you are, for us, or you have been for us, a very important person in the last month and in the last year.
Thanks.
So, yeah, we have met through Manage More. You are a program manager at Manage More. I myself, as well as the other hosts, Sabi and Luis, are scholars from Manage More. But you are more than just a program manager. You were a scholar yourself a couple of years back, and you have been an entrepreneur as well. And so we will talk about everything in the next minutes. Very excited about that. So for our listeners that do not know Manage More, I will give a quick introduction to Manage More, and then you can obviously add anything else. So Manage More is a scholarship program of Unternehmertum. Unternehmertum is the innovation hub and startup hub of Europe, based in Munich. And Manage More is a program that goes 3 semesters, so 18 months, and we have 20 talented new scholars beginning every semester. And they start actually with you and in their business design deep dive. So they work with you very intensively for about 6 months. And yeah, I think a lot of it has changed since you joined Manage More and now. So how did you actually join Manage More back when? Is it 6 years ago, 7 years ago?
No, actually, 2016 I joined.
Oh.
So long time
8
ago.
years ago already.
No, 2017.
Oh.
So, but 2016, I was a working student at Unternehmertum. It was super random how I ended up there. And I saw all those super motivated scholars and saw, oh, they're learning so much cool stuff about founding companies, entrepreneurship, they get coaching. As a working student, I could join back then workshops, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best program ever. Then I applied and got in. And back then it was quite different because obviously the language was in German back then. And also it was not as centralized because right now we have this first semester where everyone comes together, right, on Wednesday. And
sees you,
your
memes.
Thomas and I are taking care of you, and you're like all guided by the same story.
Yeah.
While back when I did it, every team had another touch point at Unternehmertum, and therefore that was super different projects. And I think 2017, there wasn't that much hype about entrepreneurship. I mean, it was already there, but it was still kind of weird when people said, oh, I want to become a startup founder and I quit my job to do Manage More. While today it's super normal, right? So there are many people who founded their companies before who even raised VC money. So there has been quite a shift away from this entrepreneurship to more entrepreneurship focus.
So that means before joining Manage More, entrepreneurship was not really part of your life and not something you thought about.
I mean, it was always interesting, but I didn't know that there was the study programs. I met actually someone at a student fair and the first semester, and he gave me this Manage More sheet. I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I should have this in the back of my mind. And then by chance, I came back to it, but it was always in the back of my head that I wanted to do a program like this. Funnily enough, years later on a Manage More retreat, I was standing in the pool with this guy and was like, weren't you the one on the student fair that gave me the handout? He was like, yes, I was. So it's really cool because you have those really long connections with people. I just will meet them somewhere again where you don't think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think joining Manage More for myself, for instance, showed me how important allyship is or how important it is to have someone that maybe gives you just a flyer at the student fair. So for myself, it was a scholar from G38 that I worked with at TUM Hyperloop. He was my team lead. And I think I would have never believed in myself to actually apply. So it's always good to have someone who actually looks at you and says, well, just do it. And I'm pretty sure you will you will do an amazing job. And that's how I ended up at Manage More. And I couldn't be happier, actually. It was an amazing last year. And I'm actually quite sad thinking about the time ending soon. But as you say, you always meet the people. And it's the connections and the community in the end that brings you forward. So getting to my next question, if you look back to your time as a scholar, so I mean, you see all of us now at Manage More, but looking at your own time, what do you cherish the most, or what is the biggest learning or experience that you like to share?
That's a really good question. Last year at the 20 years party, I shared that for me it was meeting the community the first time. But actually, it's much harder to say what was the one highlight because there are so many, right? So from meeting all the people in the start, then working with them the first time, then going into your smaller teams, doing team building with them. And all over the time, you learn new stuff. And I love learning about entrepreneurship and about all those team coaching topics around it, also intercultural communication. There was so many good highlights that I couldn't pick out one. I think also what's so cool about the community is that you can really connect with them on a professional level, but also on a very personal level. So I remember when we had our boot camp and we did the ideation with lots of post-its everywhere. Back then there was the blockchain hype. So blockchain was what AI is now. So in the break, I wrote down blockchain on Post-its and put it on the other ideation sets. And everyone came back and was like, who put down blockchain? And at one point I said like, oh, I was it. And then everyone laughed about it. So you didn't only connect about the professional stuff, but also about humor and very personal experiences. That was nice.
That's funny that you mentioned it, because I think if you ask scholars now, they would probably say exactly the same thing, and they would probably have exactly the same story, because everybody puts AI on every ideating thing, like take Gen I to do this better, take Gen I to do this and that. So yeah, I think if I think of the last year, I would probably say the same thing. And I think the best part of it is that I'm standing here and I think I don't really realize how much I've grown through that time. And that's something to reflect afterwards. And it's really nice to realize. After your Manage More time, you actually decided to take the route of an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And I know we talked about it already in the last month, and you have really nice insights from that time. So do you have, or maybe let's start from the beginning. How did you actually end up being an entrepreneur? Was that actually a coincidence, or did you look actively for the idea in your team?
Actually, I wrote my master thesis about entrepreneurship and about how entrepreneurs look back, so-called counterfactual thinking. So how do they use thoughts like, if I had done this differently, how would our situation been? And I read 150 interviews and I was like, oh my God, being a founder, how could you do that? Because they talked about the hardest time in their founding then a lot. But it was, I could say, a coincidence, because my best friend and his co-founder, so to say, they asked me to join as the third co-founder, because we had really cool prospects for a big project. And then we said, okay, let's try this out. And I think I would tell everyone, just try the things, because I had this in my head, like, oh, being an entrepreneur is so hard, but you will never get this experience if you don't try it. So I think it's better to just start and do stuff instead of being afraid of it.
Yeah, definitely. If you mention it was your best friend or one of your really close friends that you founded with, I know from myself that it is extremely hard to work with good friends, because you are so like eager to make the team work and also to stay friends. But then you obviously need to be very honest to your co-founder and be very, be very critical as well from time to time. So how was that?
So really good question. I think in the end, it depends on the people in it. And I think that we were both capable of separating this, and we were always very, very honest with each other. And I think I learned a lot from him before founding in how important it is to be honest to each other. So I think I'm also super thankful that we did this together because, it's a super important aspect about founding, that you can just share everything and be right to the point and don't hide your own feelings and thoughts. So this worked out quite well, but it's very individual, right? So sometimes it doesn't work out with best friends and there's a big fallout. I know lots of founders who work together for years and then there's technically always a fallout. But for us, it worked. But I think there can always be something where you just have so different opinions that it's super, super likely that you don't get along with each other afterwards. And that's just a risk you have to live with. But it's certainly a risk worth taking.
We will talk about team structure and how team works a little bit later. And I know you have a lot of interesting thoughts on that and how teams work, and you have seen a lot in the last years at Manage More. So after founding your startup, you then decided to stop being an entrepreneur and to go into education.
Yes.
Could you maybe take us on that journey, on that journey of deciding, because it is a difference of being an entrepreneur and then an educator, especially from a society aspect. How was that for you? How did you decide to change your path?
That's a really good question. I think I realized that education is my big passion, thanks to Unternehmertum, because I was always working with teams, coaching teams. And at one point, I started doing this as a freelancer. And I started doing this at the side. And it was always something that was my big passion. Plus, in our company, we worked a lot with students. And this was always my favorite time of the week, checking with the students, giving them feedback. So these two parts. And on the other hand, I wasn't really happy in the field we were. So we were in the energy field. And I just had the feeling, okay, that's not the one field I want to work in and where I can blossom, so to say. And I will never forget this. Once after workshops, my then girlfriend said, "Hey, Felix, you're always so happy when you come back from workshops. I've never seen you in your own startup like this." And I was like, yeah, maybe there's something hidden. And then we had it's never easy as a team, right? And after long discussions within the team, I decided at one point to really follow my passion, because I think that's where at least my passion lies, and I think also my talent, and I wanted to use that, right? And it was really great to change, and I never looked back at it that it was a bad decision or anything. So I think it was exactly the right way to do it and to follow the passion.
And we can be very happy about that path. No, honestly, I think it is a huge part of Manage More, and I think I talk for everyone saying that it is a blast being in Garching at our Unternehmertum building every Wednesday, seeing you and seeing your presentation that you worked on. And then, of course, the memes. I'm actually quite sad that you didn't bring memes today, because that would have been a great add-on to that podcast, to this podcast. But yeah, so then you joined Unternehmertum.
The memes are Manage More exclusive. Sorry, I cannot share
So
them
you have
here
to
in public.
join Manage More if you want to know the memes. Well, I can assure you they're really good. I don't get all of them,
Yes.
I must admit. I think I'm maybe too boomer for some of them, but
maybe those memes are also sometimes too old, because I showed like a meme from the 2000s on Wednesday, and last semester I also showed it, and I always ask how many people know this. And last semester it was like 5. This semester it was just 1 person, so I maybe have to adapt the memes. But when I use new memes, like last semester I used this LeBron reportedly didn't do this. And then people ask me, why do you show this meme? What is this meme? And I said, like, hey, that's trending on Twitter for the past 3 weeks. And everyone was looking at me like, what's going on?
Well, yeah,
So-
everybody says that you are more Gen Z than most of us. I would agree on that. I think a lot of the memes I don't really know, or maybe I'm a different bubble than you are. So you started as an educator, then as a program manager at Manage More for the Unternehmertum in the Academy of Innovators. And we already mentioned what you do in your daily what your daily job is. You do the innovation sprint, you work on a couple of projects from the Academy of Innovators, but you mainly have us 20 scholars, a bit like your family, your children, that you kind of try to help them grow up and help them become entrepreneurs. That's at least how I feel sometimes. And I can imagine it's an amazing journey to be part of because everyone comes together. Nobody knows each other in the first weeks. Then you do the boot camp with everyone. You try to educate us on the design thinking approach, the double diamond. I think every manager more has heard of the double diamond very often, which is actually quite a funny word. And then we use a lot of Post-its because we know Post-its are your favorite thing. And
Thomas' favorite thing.
Thomas' favorite thing. So Thomas Kirchner, just for everyone listening, Thomas Kirchner is the founder of ProGlove, or a co-founder of one of the co-founders of ProGlove. And ever since he exited his company, he is working now, or like having fun with us every Wednesday and coaching us in design thinking. And also a huge part and a huge add-on for us. So you see us, during the boot camp, you look at us, we work in teams. We then do a strength finder, the Gallup Strength Finder, and based on what comes out of the Gallup Strength Finder and what you have seen in the boot camp, you then build teams that then work on the business design deep dive, which is basically a project with a venture or a company. And as a team, you then work on a challenge and you use the design thinking approach. What is the most fun in creating these teams? I honestly want to know. Like, is it, because I imagine it being a bit like you are standing in a kitchen and then you think like, okay, what ingredients do I need to put this to get the team together? Do you sometimes think, oh, well, they get along very well, I would put them in a team? Or is it the other way around? I want to see a clash incoming. I want some entertaining. Tell me a bit your...
That's really hard.
Because it's everything.
I think everyone in Manage More wants to know how this process works and all the details in my head, so I cannot share everything. But the funniest thing is that there's so many possibilities, right? I think more than 1,000 possible constellations with 20 students. And I mean, I know you're just from 5 days, maybe kick-off events. So it's very short amount of time. There's some people where I already know a lot about, and some where it just needs time to get to know them. I mean, we're 20 people in one room, how I should know everyone instantly. But then sometimes it's like, this person and that person, I've never seen them in a room together. No, I have to see in a room, but it feels like this. Like, have they ever talked to each other? I have no idea how they will work out. And it's like, you see how limited our minds are in having like team constellations, because I think it's super normal that you see people getting along with each other and saying, there would be a good team fit. But actually, it's not that easy, because we have the strength finder, right? So we have 4 different categories that we want to balance. Plus, we want to make the teams as diverse as possible. So from study programs to gender to also how junior or senior people are. And this limits you a lot. So then you have some variables that you can change, but sometimes the same people always end up with the same people. And also there's some gut feeling to it. So last semester I did together with someone else from the program management, and we both said, yeah, I think this will work, or maybe that's not working. But sometimes the gut feeling is completely wrong. I think that's also funny. So there were teams where I was like, oh my God, let's see what happens. And then they were performing among the best teams. So I think it's always a bit tricky. But for me, it's also sad if there are people or teams that are not working where I thought like, oh, this will be a great team. But it's very complex. And even with advanced process like we use it with the Strength Finder and all the other info, a team is always organic thing, a living thing, right? So it takes a lot of work to really perform, and we can just give the guidelines to it.
Yeah.
Well, let's see how it turns out next semester.
I think especially our team is a good example of how situations can also influence a team. And I think so for everyone listening, Luis and I, who I do the podcast with now, we were put in a team. So I think Felix had a gut feeling back then that it could be a good match. And I think because of all the stress and everything you go through, so it is a very time-consuming project, and you do a lot, and you spend a lot of time with the people, not only during your project, but also during all the events that you do with Manager More. So you're kind of stuck with each other, and I think it's normal. And I mean, it's normal that every team has its ups and downs and then struggles from time to time. And I think if you had asked me in January, so first of all, I think I called you sometimes and you said at least you will be very thankful for what you experience now because you're going to learn for your life. And I just told you, I don't care. Yeah. It's just stressful right now. And obviously now looking back, I am very thankful to understand how teams work, how teams can also differ from situation to situation. And what I actually wanted to say is that Luis and I, we had our struggles and we fighted sometimes and we were not on the same page from time to time. But I'm very happy to say that we managed to work again with each other. I'm very happy about that. And I think that's the perfect example of even if a team is determined to work well and to be a perfect fit, that doesn't mean that there are not struggles, as you also mentioned. Do you have the feeling that you now have the perfect recipe of of what a team needs to become successful?
I think I learn every semester. This semester I've seen that it helps a lot to have people who are a bit more senior in the sense of that they worked in customer projects before or in the masters, but also those junior people are sometimes way more creative than the senior people. So I think there's not one recipe, and I have to ask a very philosophical question here because you said, right, there were struggles in the team, but you learned a lot. So is the question really to form perfect teams which never have struggles, and then when those scholars found later the startup and then they have conflicts, they're not prepared for it. While you probably have taken away so many learnings for your later ventures when you have conflicts, and conflicts will always happen, right? It's always the case. Or you have a certain gut feeling about how do I work with this person or not, because you were matched to each other. So I think that's the question we have to ask. On the one hand, does it have to be a perfect team? And how can we make the learning as well as possible? So meaning also to let them run into conflicts. I don't want that per se, but sometimes I think it's just...
do you?
That's what they always say. They say like, Felix, I heard you want teams that fight a lot. No, that's not the case. So
actually for everyone, Felix was not happy when we fighted a lot. Felix actually had bad dreams about it. So it's not that Felix is eager to get the drama out of the generation.
And I mean, there are different levels of drama, right? So I think there's a normal professional level of drama, and there's the drama where it becomes personal. There you learn the most, but I think no one wants to have it. So.
It's also the most hurtful, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the question that you asked, the philosophical question, is rather the way that Manager More is actually doing it, right? So the philosophy is a bit of creating a safe space where people can actually try or try out team dynamics and also try out coaching that we get. And so probably you don't have to work you don't have to create teams to create conflicts, as you said, because they will come anyways. So you said it's good to have a mix between seniors and juniors, which I totally understand. By the way, Luis was the senior and I was the junior to keep up that example alive for today's podcast. And we did have a lot of fun, honestly. And I look back on the time and we had a great project, a funny project actually, where we also got to know you very well. which was really nice. Would you say that most of the teams that you see over the years, that most of them actually, like the expectations that you have, that they get met? Or is it always a bit like a lottery and you're very surprised afterwards?
I think most of the times I'm surprised because even teams that have struggled often turn out to have great results. And I think that's also what I learned. It's just part of the process that not everything goes right all the time. And that's probably also what entrepreneurship is about. I think there were just some teams where I was a bit sad that it didn't turn out as well because they lost motivation at one point or people were not that motivated. But that was like really, really seldomly. So I think only 1 or 2 teams over the past 20 teams I worked with. And yeah, what you said before also, I mean, for the safe space, we put in so much time and effort with coaching, with working with you. I mean, we had multiple retros together with your team to try to mend the things and develop better processes. But coming to your question, sure, it's always a lottery and also super exciting for me in the first meetings. How does it work together? But sometimes teams struggle a lot in the start, which then turn out to be among the best teams. Sometimes teams have a really strong start, but then at one point lose the motivation and then suddenly are super strong in the end. So there are different phases to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, in the end, it's also in the team's hands how they perform.
My personal belief is that actually the background you have doesn't really matter, and that you don't have to be an expert on a field, but rather have the right team dynamics.
Yes.
I mean, the project that you get in your first months at Manager More, they're usually not a project that you know a lot about.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, taking my project as an example, I have never heard of that company, neither of their business, and like plumbing or whatever was not really something that I was like interested at first. Would you agree that it's not the background or the experience that the person has, even though we said, okay, it's good to have a mix of senior and junior, but it's important rather to have a good team dynamic by characters, by communication and stuff like that?
Yeah, so exactly, I think it helps a lot, no matter what the topic is, to have different views on it. So, I mean, Louis studying film was a great addition to a very hardware-driven topic. And so having the different views, it certainly is not bad to have someone who knows something, for example, about mobility, if you're in a mobility project, but it also makes you more creative if you don't have a person like this.
True.
And yeah, it's about the team dynamics. How does everyone work together? Where are the strengths and how can you combine them? I think it helps when you later go to ideas to not have someone who really can execute the idea and build it. But in the end, you don't have to be a mobility expert to build the next best mobility solution. I mean, look at all those Silicon Valley founders who are under 30, they haven't been in these industries too long and still are super successful in what they do. So I think you have to have the right mindset and the right tools for later forming a teams with the people who know the space and who can build also the right products. That's what we try to teach you.
I think that's a really important point, to highlight the tools and the mindset of a person. Because I think especially when we look into entrepreneurship, people that are not from an that do not study business, or people that don't have an engineering background often feel a bit left out or have struggles of fitting in. I mean, they don't have struggles fitting in, but they have the impression that it could be a struggle to fit in entrepreneurship. And I know it from myself, sometimes having a different background makes you feel like an imposter. So talking about teams and talking about how important a team dynamic is for success, rather than what you actually studied and what your background is really important. So highlighting the tools that you have, the mindset that you have is really, really important. So it's really, really good to hear that. What would you say? Yeah.
And then I think it's not only limited to entrepreneurship. I know so many people who started a job which they didn't know that much about, or where they didn't have prior experience. And lots of people also being a bit older, changing jobs or industries and trying out new stuff. It's basically everywhere, right? You don't have to study a certain topic. I mean, in engineering, it's something different. Like you have to know how to code to be a software engineer. But also there, at one point, you will take over teams, and then you have to manage teams. And you never learn that in study programs.
In university.
So I think there are more skills and a lot of courage that you have to just take over roles and try out new stuff, and always the ability to learn quickly something new.
What have you learned about communication?
Communication.
So communication is a huge topic.
Yes.
It's I always thought I knew how to communicate. I always thought I'm a good communicator. And then you realize working with a team, well, maybe I'm not that good at communicating. Yeah. What did you learn about communication, and what do you teach about communication?
So that's a really good question. I think many people are in this mindset, I know communication and I communicate very well. But the funny thing is, every semester, students come to me and say, it's not working well. And this person is doing this, and here we have this problem. And then I ask them, have you ever talked to the person or to a team? And they say, like, no. And I'm like, why are you coming to me? You should talk to the person that you have a
You're
problem with.
You're just so
nice,
nice, We just want to have your memes, when we come with a problem.
Yes, and I mean, that's superhuman to look for someone to get advice and to have a conversation, so to say, in your head about the situation, what to do. But what I see is that lots of people never communicate, and then they build up this picture in their head about other people, which at one point is not fair, right? Because you just have your own thoughts and you never hear out the other person. So I think what I learned is to tell the people do retros as early as possible and make a session about topics like commitment and talking about problems and asking for the others and their ideas, because the others in your team can only change if you tell them what you don't like or what's going wrong. So I think the first lesson about communication is to actually communicate with those you are working with and not with the others or your own head.
We talked about retros quite often. We mentioned that, I think, for someone who has never done a retro, that sounds like a weird buzzword. Yes. What do we understand when we talk about retros?
So retros are a tool to really look on a team, how do we work together? And the funny thing is, lots of teams, especially those with an engineering background, always think it's like, how do we work together regarding the content? Or what's the content coming out? But that's not the point. It's about really the interpersonal relationships and not how did you come to the results and how do you interact with each other. So there are lots of different tools that you will find online. I think the easiest one is to just let everyone rate different dimensions of the team. Like how safe do you feel in the team? How understood do you feel in the team? How high is the resilience? And so on. You can add all the dimensions you like. And I just see, okay, where are the differences? Why for some trust is at 10 and for others just at 5. And that automatically brings up the conversation. Or talking about commitment. I mean, in the end, a retro is just like asking after a long meeting, okay, how does everyone feel now? And what do you think about the process? Just doing this for 5 minutes can add great value in your team and to get a feeling for how is everyone working and how does everyone perceive it to be other than me, who maybe thinks that everything is going wrong. So I think it's super powerful to look back at how are we actually doing and how are we functioning as a team? Not only how good are the results.
How do I make sure that I have a that I draw a real line between staying professional and not being personal? Because in the end, especially when we talk about communication and team dynamics, it becomes personal very
Yes.
quickly.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, the big drama starts.
Yeah.
So how do we manage that, or how can we manage that as a team?
So it helps to have a coach who draws like the line and says like, okay, this does not belong in the room, or to have strict rules like for feedback. We have this framework that we always say, I felt about, no, you did this, not best saying you, but I saw that we acted like this. Then the next step you say, this made me feel like you don't trust me a lot. And in the next steps, I would wish for XY, more trust. So that's really hard. And I think it always helps to have a coach. Also, when we had our company, it always feels like our coach doesn't know our team, but it's really important to have like this framework and to speak openly. And what I realized that personal assaults hurt a lot, all of the people involved. So if you are hurt personally, then you should always voice that feeling and make aware that something went too far, because it's important that we talk about how we work together and our feelings, but there should always be this red line that's never crossed, because it could happen that you can't go back, that then that real damage is done.
Yeah, definitely. So when we talk about the personal aspects and the professional aspects, would you say that when we talk in a retro to each other, that it is important to talk about details, or to stay like in a rather broader perspective on the team? Because my first impression would be the moment where I stay in a broader perspective and try to kind of explain the situation from the big picture perspective, that I stay professional rather than pointing out details, which feels personal to me. But probably that's not the case for everyone, right? So it's not not a rule to follow.
I would say it's not that easy to give an answer to this, because sometimes we have teams who are going back like 2 months and saying, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. But on the other hand, if you're too abstract, there's a lot of interpretation from your side, right? So it helps to stay with the actual stuff that happened, instead of, okay, I think, or I have the feeling that the trust is really bad, because how can someone work with this, instead of saying, I saw that you corrected my slides without telling me. Can you please?
Typical.
Now I have the feeling that I'm not trusted. So I think that's something others can also work with. But yeah, again, there's this line that you really have to be aware of.
True. Yeah, definitely. So when we work as a team, we try to do a lot of expectation management.
Yes.
What role does expectation management play in that whole scenario?
I think lots of people do expectation management, and then the one mistake is to never come back to it. I see so many teams. I also remember yours, what you had on your team canvas. Lots of the stuff I think was never done, or you never checked in on it again. So I think it's important to see, okay, what are the expectations and what are the milestones that we want to check in on this? Because everyone can draw up a board and then never think about it again. It's really important to check in and also to change it and be honest, because expectations can change. We are all humans. We all have our lives. So to make everyone aware why there might be a change to the expectations and why you cannot reach certain goals. But on the other hand, it's important to also have a certain aspiration. I mean, manage more, that's not a problem most of the time, or so never a problem, I would say. But to have like a certain high bar for your own goals and expectations, because you could always go too low and then also the pressure is gone, so to say.
I must admit, sometimes it feels a bit over-engineered
Yes.
to do so many retros and to talk about team dynamics so often. I feel that sometimes at work that 4 weeks are over and then we have a team retro or a one-on-one, and I feel like, I didn't really have had time to think about what we talked about last time. So what are the best, or what would you say are the best ingredients for retros? What should be the timestamps between them? Or is there maybe not a rule, but rather the team should maybe be proactive when they feel like a retro is needed?
That's a really, really good question. So I see some teams who need it a lot. But others are also doing fine with less retros. It has to do with the way a team is working with, how do they connect. I think if everyone is a retro and is like, hey, what should we really talk about? It's not not that optimal, but you should do a regular check-in at some points, because it also happened to me when I did manager more, that I thought everyone was happy, and then the retro was like, there was this big conflict.
Never heard of it.
Or a big conflict of views, and I never heard of it. Or I wasn't aware there was such big of a topic. So I would say have like regular check-ins every 2 months. So that's also the duration we do at Manager More. But if it feels over-engineered, what's something we can work with and that fits better to our working style? Maybe it's just a check-in, a check-out after each meeting instead of bi-weekly retros. To overstate it a bit. But yeah, I think there's no general answer to that.
What I really like about the startup ecosystem is that we interpret new work a bit new or maybe a bit differently than corporates would do. And you just mentioned check-in and check-outs. I think especially if I tell my parents that at my work we do check-ins, or if we whenever I am in a meeting we try to do a check-in, they would probably tell me that's a waste of time, because if everybody answers a question, for instance, just to give a random question, a check-in question could be, what skill would you learn in prison? If you're in prison for 2 years. And I mean, I know we do that because we want everyone in the room to talk for at least 1 or 2 sentences, maybe also to lose the fear of saying something during the meeting. And I really like that aspect of startups, that we try new ways of making a professional work environment, but that keeps new work alive and that keeps new strategies alive. What else can I incorporate into my team or in my meetings or generally in my team culture to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, and first and foremost that I create a psychology, like a psychological safety of psychology. I don't, how do we call it?
Psychological safety.
That we create a psychological safety in the team.
Yeah. So that's a really great point. So I wanted to mention psychological safety before because it's such a great concept. And actually, it comes from hospitals and big corporates. So just to dive a bit deeper into this, psychological safety was discovered, so to say, in the 90s by researchers who asked themselves, okay, why are some teams in the hospital performing way better than others? And they saw it was due to psychological safety. And lots of people think psychological safety is, we are all happy, we're working together, we're cool startup.
We have snacks.
We have snacks, everything's nice. But that's not psychological safety. Psychological safety, coming back to communication again, is, hey, I can tell the other person how I feel about them, and I can tell everyone about the mistakes I made. So I don't have fear to retribution to saying my opinion and what I see. Funnily enough, that doesn't work too well because lots of teams are scared of this. And that's, again, the communication aspect. People come to me instead of telling the team. So having a psychological safety is the number one point you have to work on, but it's really, really hard to build. So again, ask yourself, in my company, in my student team, in my group that I'm working, does everyone feel empowered to voice their opinion, also if it's negative? And if this is the case, it's normally a great team. There have also been great big studies done at Google who showed this. Disney Pixar is a great example of doing this. I think in creative space, you have to be really honest what's good and what's bad. And coming back to what are startups doing differently, I think this is hard to answer because there are like different schools and how people think about how they should lead, as it is always the case. But what we believe at Unternehmertum is that you should not only see the working output, but the person, right, behind it and the human. So check-ins are not only for everyone says something in the room, but everyone brings in how are they feeling today and their personal view. And I think this is a great way to make work more tangible or make every human more tangible in the room. Apart from this, I think being very quick and also working with Post-its, writing down stuff on all those thousands tools there are, but just building stuff and not always keeping the ideas in your head. I mean, that's the same like psychological safety in communication. Instead of thinking about it, talk. Instead of visualizing in your head and dreaming about something, just build a prototype or sketch it so the others can understand it faster.
So I really like that. And I also like the short introduction to psychological safety in a team. I would say everybody that has experienced psychological safety in the team knows that it comes from a leader that is really giving you a good feeling and that is really confident in his role of being a leader. What would you say are small steps that a leader or a team can use to create the psychological safety? I mean, I understood.
Yeah.
It is hard. It is not something that you can do from today and tomorrow. It's there. It's also a lot of trust from your team towards you. But are there maybe small learnings that we can take from that, or how to incorporate that?
So first of all, just asking everyone in the team, how do you feel about that? What are your doubts? What could go wrong? Just asking this question, getting everyone to think and say what could be a threat to the company or to a product is super helpful, and also shows that every view is valued. And a change to the mindset of we are perfect to, hey, we have to be aware that mistakes can happen. So please say them if you see them. It's a big step. And so I read this whole book about psychological safety by Amy Edmondson, and she gives great examples of leaders who say, I don't know, can you help me? So the openness that you as a team find a solution, and it's not only the leader. So there are lots of small steps, and also I see this sometimes that it can hurt, or it hurts that people are honest and telling you their opinions. But then it's important to find out where's they're coming from and how can we work with this effectively. Because the worst would be if someone always says, oh, it's so great, imagine more, it's perfect, but then goes out and tells other people, oh no, it's not the right program, and I criticize it. So we always voice this, give us all your opinions, because the worst is if those opinions are not voiced in the room, but to someone else or stay in their head, because we all want to get better. The first step to this is, do we know what we can improve? Because if we don't know, how should we improve something?
Yeah, I think these are good advice for leaders that want to get psychological safety in their team. I think a lot of people struggle as being in a team and having a leader that may not be focusing on that and focusing on being openly. Do you have any advice for that? How could they start communicating their their ideas openly, or how they could maybe also tell their team lead that they would love to incorporate more, I don't know, check-ins or more of their ideas in their daily business?
I think there's no one size fits all answer. So that's why I also in the past loved it to work with coaches to find out the best solution for my situation. But first of all is this mindset of, hey, what could we change and what are we already happening, or bringing just ideas and in a one-on-one, or setting up or bringing in other team coaches, asking the leaders, what can we do to develop as a team? Are there any resources that we can use? And if they're not, asking those little questions like, can we try out something new? Or just regarding psychological safety, have you asked about the opinions of everyone? What could go wrong? I think that's important to ask, but in theory, that's always easier than it actually is. Because as I said, psychological safety hurts, but it helps a lot.
Yeah. Probably that's also one key ingredient if we talk about the recipe from the beginning, that whatever team you create, that you try to create this psychological safety. And you always talk about team building, and team building is so important. And do team building in whatever you do. Just have fun and get to know each other. And obviously that also helps a lot, right?
It's a really good point, because in the past I've seen many people manage more. Every team has a team building budget, right? And those teams who have conflicts are normally those with the most team building budget left. So I really advise teams to go somewhere else, to meet privately. Sometimes students really get that, and they come back and say like, yeah, it was cool, but we didn't drink or anything, or didn't have fun. So I think it could have been better. And that's exactly the right spirit, to just spend some time together, get to know the humans behind the work. And what's really great, the students picked up on that. So I now show always the pictures of the teams. Like in your generation, one team went to Italy. I show those pictures. And I think this semester, every team left Munich for their team building. So one team went to Berlin, one to the Alps. Last semester, we had one team going to Mallorca.
Yeah, so I heard that.
So that's the thing you have to do, because sometimes I meet people from older generations that say like, yeah, professionally it was really hard, but at least we can talk about it, and we like each other as humans, but I wouldn't work with that person. I think that's a great outcome, to say at least you bond on another level, that you always stay in connection, instead of just, okay, the project was bad, I never want to talk about this again. Because normally in life, it's never that it's not that extreme that you won't meet the person again at one point.
So basically, learning out of this podcast for any leader out there or any company, pay your team a vacation, maybe on Ibiza or maybe on Mallorca or something like that. So we talked.
Sorry, I think I want to add with like the goal that you as humans connect, right? Because if it's only for, hey, better efficiency, we want to work better, then people will also realize that, and then it's also not worth it. So I think it's always about the intention behind it, and not about just what are we doing.
So the intention of getting to know each other personally. Also, that helps if you know what happens in that life of the person outside of the office. It helps to understand their situation, helps to understand why they're maybe stressed. So that played a huge role looking back in our team to just understand what has that person going on personally. So we said, first and foremost, there's no recipe. I'm a bit sad about that. I thought you bring out a list of like, okay, guys, that's how we build a team. So there's no recipe, but
I think that's one of the biggest learnings of my life I always thought, okay, there's this one recipe and I read this book and then I know everything about it. But I'm really happy about this learning that life is not, okay, completely right, completely wrong. It's always somewhere in between and it's super complex. So instead of reading this book or this blog or listening to this podcast, you should always try it out yourself and what works best for yourself. And it's a bit sad that there's no recipe, but I think it also takes away the stress of, okay, am I wrong now? Because in the end, there's so much wiggle room that everyone has to find their own individual way to do stuff.
It's good to hear that, because I hate reading and I always find reasons why I should not read and why I don't need to read that book. And now I know I don't have to read the book, because in the end it's something in between and not what the book says.
But it can give you. So I think there are two types of books. Those books that tell you, okay, this is the one way to do it. And if you don't do it like this, you're completely wrong. And those showing you, okay, these are the possibilities you can do it. These are the methodologies, like psychological safety. Also, Never Split the Difference, the book about communication, I always recommend. After reading Never Split the Difference, you think like, okay, now I figured out how to do better communication, but it became way, 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 way more complex. So I think those are the best books who give you some tools that you can use, but also show you that it's not a black and white situation.
But that's the reason why I now have this podcast with Luis and Sabi, because then I invite people that can tell me what's in the books and what they learned. And so I don't have to read the book. So
exactly, that's really good.
It's a bit more work than actually reading the book itself, but it's definitely more fun.
Yes.
So we talked a lot about teams. We said psychological safety is important.
Yeah.
We also mentioned that psychological safety is based on trust and also based on the leaders trying to get the opinions of their team, and also sometimes a trip to Mallorca can help. That's what I take out of this conversation. So to finish up and to wrap it up, I'm super happy to have had you here, and I know that you do an amazing job at what you do every day. And I think deciding to stop your entrepreneurial journey for now, we never know what happens, but to join as an educator at the Unternehmertum was, at least for us, an amazing decision, because
Thanks a lot.
Because we obviously had a lot of advantages of that. I know you are a great talker. I know you're really good at motivating people and to get the spark out of the people. But I want to know, if you were on the stage of TED Talk and you had young people in front of you, what would you tell them?
That's a good question.
I know I do have a lot of really good questions.
Yes.
Okay.
So I would ask them, okay, have you ever looked around and asked yourself who created all of this? Because a lot of times we just take things for certain or for given, like this lamp, for example. But actually thinking about it, who came up with this? How was the history? I mean, lamps are quite new, but you have seen it with the iPhone or AI now, how fast it's adapted. It's just there, right? And we think like, yeah, it's there. But have you ever thought about what could be your impact on this world and how you could influence this and create something? It doesn't have to be a product. It can also be something non-tangible, like what's your influence to politics or that organizations run better? And how can you place this tiny, tiny, tiny dent in the world to make it a bit better and just build new stuff? And if you want to know these tools and get this mindset, I think all those programs teaching you entrepreneurship are the right things, are the right point to start. Like Manage More. For us, it's important that there are people who are change makers in every sense of not just building the coolest product or build the biggest startup. No, really having a good impact on the world and make it better, and also bring your personal attributes to this world. And yeah, just starting creating. I think today we are in this super consumer society, more and more and more through also social media, TV. But what about the other side? How can we just build stuff, or just writing down your thoughts is already creating something? Um, I think it would be great if everyone comes in this mindset of creating new things, and it's also great. So when I see what buzz it has, when friends of mine start building their own products or startups, and everyone loves it. So I think you cannot go wrong there, because either it's really cool, and if it's bad, you learn a lot, right? So it's a win-win situation in the end.
And if you create something, keep in mind, have a great team, work as a team.
Yes.
Try to communicate well, have retros, create psychological safety. And in the end, and I think that's the key to success for everything, follow your passion. And that's exactly what you did. So thank you for being here today. And thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and all of your insights, experiences that you have on the topic.
Thank
and
you
I hope
for hosting this.
you guys enjoyed it.
Thanks for the invite.
Spark is proudly presented by Ripple Film, storytelling for tech, B2B, and beyond.